Good evening to all my brothers and sisters and respected seniors. Hello. Can I proceed?
Yes, you are audible.
Good evening to all my brothers and sisters and respected seniors. Okay. I have chosen the section 12 and 13 of the Indian Defence Act. So before starting to explain section 12 and 13, I would like to request Honorable Dhatenge sir, if any mistake is done by me, that must be corrected to that respect. So, section 12 Indian Evidence Act, the heading of the section 12 is that in a suits for the damages, clearly in wording itself, that wording is very important. In a suits damages, fact tending to enable the court to determine the amount are relevant. Friends, before starting to read the section 12, I would like to invite attention of all the respected friends that in the wording it is specifically mentioned in a suits. So the question must become in the mind of all the participants that where the suits has been defined anywhere. So as per the there are two in the CRPC, if we can consider civil law, in the civil law, if we consider the civil procedure code, in the civil procedure code, nowhere mention the suits. All definitions are given in the civil procedure code. So we must know what is meant by suits. So the expression suit is not defined in the code of CPC. Even also, if we kindly consider the General Statute Act, sorry, General Clauses Act of hello. If we kindly consider the General Clauses Act of 1897, in that clause also, General Clauses Act also, it is nowhere specifically defined. So in the first time in Privy Council in Hansraj versus Dehradun Electronic Tramway Company Limited, the judgment was reported in AIR 1933. Privy Council. So that fact, that word is clear. What is meant by suit? That is the word mentioned is the suits. So first of all, we have to consider what is meant by suit. So suit is defined by the Privy Council in the judgment, which specifically enlighten that suit means a civil proceeding instituted by the presentation of the plaintiff. So what in the ordinary sense, what is suit means? Suit is an action of any kind, whether any law or equity. In other words, a suit of civil nature is a suit to enforce a legal right, a suit in which any valuable right is sought to be enforced. So, by dealing with Section 12 of the Indian Evidence Act, we must first of all to know the suits, because the wording suits for the damages. So when we come to know the suits, then and then after we come to the proceed. What is meant by damages? So the relevant provision in the CPC that enlighten the word suit. So without going to go into details, I have just enlighten the relevant provision in the CPC in which reference of the word suit is mentioned. So the section 9 specifically deals court to try all the suits of civil nature unless barred. Thereafter section 10, stay of suits. Thereafter section 12, bar to further suits. Section 15, court in which suit to be instituted. Then section 16, suit to be instituted where the subject matter situate. Thereafter section 17, suit for the immovable property situate within the jurisdiction of the different court. Thereafter section 18, place of the institution of the suit where the local limit of jurisdiction of the courts are uncertain. Thereafter, section 19, suit for the compensation for the wrongs of the person and movables. So section 19 is a very relevant provision in the CPC, because when we are filing a suit for the compensation or damages, it would be certain that to which court that suit will lie. So section 19, suit for the compensation for the wrongs to persons or movables. Thereafter, section 20, other suit to be instituted where the defendant resides or cause of action arose. Thereafter, section 26 of the Civil Procedure Code, which specifically deals with the institution of the suit. Then chapter 4, the judgment in the Privy Council, Hansraj versus Dehradun Electronic Tramway Company Limited, reported in AIR 1933, Privy Council 63. So, section 20 deals with the other suits to be instituted where the defendant resides or cause of action arose. Thereafter, section 21A, which was introduced by the amendment, that is the bar on a suit to set aside a decree on an objection to the place of suing. The chapter 4 deals with the suit in a particular cases. So the section is mentioned in section 79 to 88 of the Civil Procedure Code, which specifically mentions suit in particular cases, that is the suit against the government for alien enemies. Thereafter, it must be noted that order first in the Civil Procedure Code is also relevant, that is the parties to the suit. While instituting suit, it must be known to the parties against whom suit has to be brought. So the order first is relevant, that is the parties to the suit. It includes section order 1 to 13 rules. It includes rule 1 to 13. Thereafter, order 2 deals with the frame of the suit, in which there are total 7 rules. Then order 3, recognize agent and pleaders. And order 4, institution of the suit. That is, there are 2 rules, rule 1 and rule 2. So if we summarize what is meant by suits and what are the essential provision in the CRPC, which will be helpful while determining a suits for the damages. So in nutshell, what are the essential of the suits? The essential of suits are there must be opposing parties, then there must be cause of action, then there must be a subject matter, and in that relief must be claimed. These are the 4 essential requirements for the institution of the suit. Unless and until these 4 requirements are fulfilled, no suit can be live. So we have considered the word suit. So let us consider the word damage. So before considering the word damage, the question must come in the mind of all the participants whether the word damage and damages, because in section 12 it is specifically mentioned for the damages, not damage. Word damage is not worded, it is worded as such damages. So friend, we must know what is the difference between the damage and damages. So damage means a loss or injury to the personal property. Simple word. Damage means loss or injury to the person or property. And what is meant by damages? Damages means money claimed or ordered to be paid by a person as a compensation for the loss or injury. So the damages means money claimed by or ordered to be paid by a person as a compensation for the loss or injury. It must be remembered that the concept of damage is different one and concept of damages is different one. So the legal meaning the damages is the monetary compensation awarded by the court in a civil action to an individual who has been injured through the wrongful conduct of another party. That is, when the suit is instituted for the damages, in that case, the court has to consider what monetary compensation should be awarded to the plaintiff to redress his grievance. So, in other words, as far as civil law is concerned, that is the word is damages is used. So, if we kindly consider whether in the CRPC any term of whether the concept of damages is introduced or not. So, as per the CPC is concerned or civil wrongs are concerned, the concept is known as damages. So far as a criminal wrong is concerned, the concept is known as a compensation. So if you kindly consider the whole CRPC, there is not wording that damages is to be awarded. There is a wording that is a compensation to be given to the victim. So that must be distinguished. In the civil law or in a civil wrong, court will award the damages, and while in a criminal cases, court will award the compensation. So it is related. So I am discussing that concept. So we understand that concept. And another word also, damages means money compensation for the loss or injury caused by wrongful act of the another. And the recovery of damage is the objective of the civil law. In civil law, what the remedy is asked by the plaintiff, or what was the object of the civil law to redress the grievance of the any party, that by way of compensation, by way of specific relief, or in other way. So, the purpose of the damages. What is the purpose of damages? The purpose of damages is to restore an injured party to the position the party was before being harmed. So that was the purpose of the awarding damages. That party must be restored to his original position before he being harmed. So, my friends, how to know? We have to understand what are the different kinds of damages. While when we file the suit for the damages, we must know what are the different kinds of the damages, because unless and until we don't know what kinds of damages are there, then we cannot claim it. So as per the statute, there are 6 kinds of damages. The first is compensatory damages, then incidental damages, consequential damages, nominal damages, liquidated damages, and punitive damages. So broadly, the damages are to be classified into that category. So if you kindly consider one, the compensatory damages, it is also known as money damages. That is the money that get repaired for the injuries or loss caused by another. Whatever the loss is suffered by the party, that has compensated. So by the wording itself, the meaning is that is compensation, compensatory damages. That money to be paid to the injured party. That is known as compensatory damages. Thereafter, consequential damages is known as evasive damages, or consequent damages is known as also a special damages, because failure of the one party to meet the contracted obligation. A party has made a contract and the party has breached the contract, then due to the breach of that contract, what the consequences are occurred and due to which the party has suffered, that will be compensated. That is called as a consequential damages. Thereafter, incidental damages are mentioned that are correlated with the compensatory damages. Thereafter, nominal damages. The concept of nominal damages he specifically mentioned that the nominal damages are very small damages awarded to show that the loss or harm suffered was technical rather than actual. Since it is in a nominal nature, the actually loss was not suffered, but as per the principles involved, the damages are small in quantity or small in nature, very small in nature. So it must be awarded. Support was technical rather than actual. So thereafter, concept of liquidated damages. Liquidated damages, as per the Indian Contract Act 1872 is concerned, section 73 to 75, the concept of section 73 to 75, chapter 6 of the Indian Contract Act, in which also the heading of that chapter 6 of the consequences of the breach of contract. So the section 34 deals with compensation for the loss or damage caused by the breach of contract. Then section 34 deals with the compensation for the breach of contract where the penalty is stipulated for. And section 75, party rightfully responding in the contract entitled to the compensation. So just I would like to invite attention of all the participants. These are relevant provision while we are filing suit under the Contract Act for the breach of contract. That provision has to be considered. So we have no much time. So I'm not going to that aspect, but I have just enlightened that must be considered while framing of the suit, while asking the remedy for the compensations. So the liquidated damages is one of the important concepts of contract act. Liquidated damages are those damages which are agreed by the parties while entering into the contract. If the parties has at the time of making of the contract has specifically made a provision in respect of breach of contract, what will be the suffer? But if the party in default will suffer, then he is entitled that the agreed terms between the parties. So thereafter, punitive damages, which are also termed as awarded in special cases only. That is, the wording itself is the punitive damages in the form of punishment also. So it is foreign to the contract, but it will be considered at later stage. So these are the basically 6 kinds of damages which are very important while dealing with the section 12. So in a breach of contract, the remedy for the plaintiff is for the first damages and specific performance, rescission of the contract, restitution of the contract. But to that aspect, in the section concern, it is only related to the damages. So thereafter, as we have seen, the concept of damage in a contract law. At the same time, we have to see what is the concept of damages in a tort, because in a tort also damages are awarded to the parties. So in a tort, the damages awarded in respect of tort. So what was the aim or object of awarding damages in a tort? That object is to put the injured party in the same position as he would have been if the tort had not occurred. So aim is to restore the claimant or the applicant to his pre-incident position. So in the tort also there are three types of tort. So what are the 3 types of torts? First is intentional torts, second negligence, and third strict liability. So we have studied in the LLB law colleges that in the tort, the concept of tort, which is respect of you be just I be rebellion. The principle is a well-known principle. You be just I be rebellion. When there is right, there is remedy. So the concept of tort, in tort there are there are three kinds of torts. That is, first, intentional torts, in which damages can be claimed. Second, negligence tort, in which damages can be claimed. And in the strict liability, in which damages also can be claimed. We well known the concept of strict liability in the landmark judgment of Renal versus Fletcher. So, if we kindly consider all this provision that is in a civil law, damages, what are the provisions of the damages? In contract act, what are the specific provision which was mentioned, which deals with the concept of damages as well as compensation or loss of injury? So, my friends, suit for the damages, the wording of section 12. In a suit for the damages, facts tending to enable the court to determine the amounts are relevant. Means damages which are the pecuniary satisfaction which the plaintiff may get in a suit are always a facting issue. Means when suit is filed, the damages are the facting issue. That has to be proved by the plaintiff. That what was the actual loss suffered by the plaintiff, what was the extent to which he is entitled for the damages. So, in a suit for the damages, the factor issue is the damages. Damages are claimed either in an action based on contract or tort, as we have seen earlier. That the damages are claimed either in an action based on contract or tort. So, therefore, I have discussed the concept of tort and what are the three types of torts. The question as to when damages may be awarded and amount of damages to be awarded is the question of a particular branch of substantive law. So, my friends, when we are concept damages in civil law, we different concept. As per the substantive law, what are the requirement of that law that has to be considered. So I am repeating the question as to when the damage will be awarded and the amount of the damages to be awarded is the question of a particular branch of substantive law under the provision of which such a suits are brought. So when suit is brought under the Contract Act, then the provision of the contract will be considered. If the suit is brought under the tort, then the provision of the tort has to be considered. So it will be depend upon the law which will be taken by the plaintiff to enforce his rights. The suit in which the damages are claimed, amount of the damages is always a facting issue. That is the facting issue. What is damages? Which the damages was claimed, which the damages was claimed by the plaintiff. That is the facting issue. So, Section 12 deals with the in a suit for damages, facts tending to enable the court to determine the amounts are relevant. So we kindly read the section 12. In the suits in which damages are claimed, any fact which will enable the court to determine the amount of damages which ought to be awarded is relevant. So, while determining the amount of damages, court has to consider that is what was the criteria to determine the damages. So the general principle is that to increase or diminishes the damages, that concept, that is the mitigating or aggregating factors has to be considered by the court while calculating the damages in the suits. So one of the important concept which was mentioned in the contract act, that is quantum merit. What is meant by quantum merit? Means a reasonable sum of money to be paid for the services rendered when the amount is not specific in a legally enforced contract. I am repeating that. What is meant by quantum merit means a reasonable sum of money to be paid for the services rendered when the amount is not specifically mentioned in a contract act. So it is a concept which is mentioned in the contract act. It is so in a suit for damages, that amount is always that the damages amount is a fact in issue, and evidence could be given under section 5 of any fact which will enable the court to determine this fact in issue. So it is the duty of the court to consider the circumstances of the case and pass an appropriate order as to the probable loss. So I have come one judgment of the Supreme Court, S.K. Gafoor versus State of Maharashtra, S.K. Gafoor versus State of Maharashtra, 2007, SSC Online, Bombay, 1128, in which the Honorable Supreme Court has awarded the damages to the plaintiff. That the fact of the case is that the land of the plaintiff was adjacent to the one of canal. After the percolation of the water, the crops of the plaintiff was damaged. So a suit in a civil court for the damages. So the question is come before the court, what kind of damages has awarded to the court? What kind of damages to be awarded to the plaintiff? So court will be not in a position to calculate what are the exact loss suffered to the plaintiff. So in that judgment, Supreme Court has mentioned the principle that the probable loss of income that the damages of the crop would have been produced per acre that would be awarded to the plaintiff. So that is the one of the judgment I have seen, because there is not a specific judgment on the that point. So my friends, remember that thing that as per the section 5 of the Indian Evidence Act is concerned, evidence has to be tendered in respect of the damages which was relevant under section as the relevancy of the fact is concerned. So while dealing with the section 12, it must be also to note that what is the difference between the compensation and damages. So because in the section 12 it is mentioned in respect of suit for the damages, but at the same time when I am reading the section at the time the question is come up in my mind, that is what is the difference between the compensation and damages. So damages are awarded for the suffering injuries while the compensation stands on a higher footing. So damages are the base while the compensation are the higher footing on the damages. The compensation aims to be place the injured party back in a position as if the injury has not taken place by the way of pecuniary relief for the caused injury. So generally damages are usually awarded for the tortious act or a civil breach of contract, while the compensation is awarded for any loss due to the criminal act that can be compensation. So my friends, if you kindly consider the provision in the CRPC and the concept of the compensation, why the damages is not worded anywhere in the CRPC, why the compensation is worded in the CRPC. So the compensation is awarded for any loss due to any criminal act that can be compensated. So in respect of compensation is concerned, there must be any loss due to any criminal act. Unless and until the act which was suffered is by which the party suffered is a criminal act, we cannot term as a compensation. So the compensation is awarded only in respect of the criminal acts that can be compensated by the way of compensation. So, my friends, it would be relevant to enlighten the important provision in the CRPC which deals with the concept of the compensation. So as per the section 10 is concerned, it is damages in civil law is concerned. In case of criminal law is concerned, criminal act is concerned by which party is injured, in which we cannot claim as damages, but we can claim for the compensation. So the relevant provision in the CRPC which will deals with the compensation. So the section 250 of the CRPC is concerned compensation for the acquisition without reasonable cause. Thereafter, section 357 is concerned order to pay the compensation. Thereafter, section 357A is concerned victim compensation scheme. Thereafter, 357B is concerned compensation to be in addition to the fine under section 326 section 376D the IPC. Thereafter, section 358 of the CRPC is concerned compensation to the person groundlessly arrested. And thereafter, 421 is the recovery of 421 section 421 of the CRPC is also dealing what is the procedure to recover the compensation. Thereafter, section 431 is concerned money awarded to be paid recoverable as a fine. When the JMFC court has awarded any money, that has to be recovered as a fine. So, my friends, we have considered the provision in respect of damages in respect of civil law as well as compensation in respect of criminal law. So, I would like to further uh, 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 tell you that after that, what is the difference between fine and damages? Whether they are same, the question is certainly, the answer is certainly that these are different one. Fine and damages are not the same. So my friends, if we see the section 53 of the IPC, clause number 6, in which fine punishment is provided, that is a fine. It is one of the kind of punishment. So fine is the criminal sanction used to punish a violative or violator of the criminal law. If any person violates the law, then under the penal statute, fine is imposed as per the section 53 is concerned. It is the fine. So the fine is the punishment, while the damages often called as the penalties, but in a civil laws. So my friends, the concept of fine and damages, those seems to be synonymous, but they are different one because fine is awarded as a punishment, while the damages are awarded in a civil laws. That has to be considered because civil law is different. The concept of civil laws are different. The concept which was evolved by the criminal law is different. So the fine is a punishment, while the damages is the penalties, so-called penalties in a civil laws. So at the same time, in respect of the compensation is concerned, section 95 of the CPC is concerned, compensation for the obtaining arrest, attachment or injunction on insufficient ground. That is also mentioned in section 95 of the CPC. That is the compensation for the obtaining arrest, attachment or the injunction on insufficient ground. So at the same time, cost. So we have to know all the concept. What is meant by damages? What is meant by damage? What is meant by compensation? What is meant by fine? And what is meant by the cost? So my friends, all these concepts, though seems to be similar, but there is niceties in each of one. So the cost is concerned. Cost in a legal parlance, cost means the expenses incurred in the instituting or defending an action. So once again, I will repeat. The cost means the expenses incurred in instituting or defending an action. So in the CPC, the specific provision is mentioned in respect of the cost. So section 35 related to the cost, section 35A of the CPC related to the compensatory cost in respect of the false or vexatious claim or defenses. Section 35B deals with the cost for the causing delays. So if you kindly consider whole the discussion in which I have enlightened the provision in respect of the damages, compensation, fine, cost. So that all has to be considered when the suit is instituted for the damages. That all concept we have to know the all the things, unless and until that are known to us, we cannot succeeded in our suit. So that is the very important concept I have explained as I have learned from my studies. So thereafter we come to the section 13 that deals with the section 13 is also very important. Section 13, the wording of the section is that fact relevant when right or custom is in a question. So the wording itself is mentioned the fact relevant when right or custom is in a question. So before starting to read that section, I would like to invite attention of my friends. First of all, we must know what is meant by right and what is meant by custom. Unless and until we know the right, what is meant by right and custom, we cannot uh, analyze the section 30. So the rights are concerned. Right is an action of the person which law permits. In general legal parlance, what is meant by right? Right is any action of a person which law permits. जे की कायद्याने त्याला परमिट केलेला जो कायद्याने त्याला अधिकार दिलेला आहे. In another words, standard of permitted action within a certain spheres which are called as the rights. So when the concept of right is occurred, we have to know what is meant by legal rights, civil rights. So legal rights is different from the moral and natural rights. Friends, legal rights are the rights which are recognized or which are given by the statute, or the moral or natural rights are the rights which may not be recognized and protected by the law. So, right to vote, right of patent, right. These are the legal rights. So, at the same time, whether when we knowing the concept of right, we have deal with the legal right. That at the same time, we must know the civil right. Whether there is a difference between the legal right and civil right. Civil rights are included in the legal rights because civil rights are those rights which provides opportunity to the each person to live to lead a civilized social life. That is also the right is known as the right to life, liberty, equality. These are the civil rights. So broadly considered, there are different kinds of rights. That is the natural rights, moral rights, civil rights, political rights, economical rights. So I'm not going to detail to that aspect. So I just enlighten what is meant by right and what are the different kinds of rights. So at the same time, what is the difference between the right and duties? Whether duties are enforceable. So the duties is an obligation as per the section, as per the Article 51A of the Constitution is concerned, obligations are imposed on the citizen of India. There are in all total might be 1 to 11 obligations which are introduced in the 51 Article 51A of the Constitution. So the right is an entitlement. So there is a difference. Duty is an obligation, while the right is an entitlement. So when we consider the rights, we must know what are the features or the characteristics of the rights. When we call as a right, when to any right we call as a rights. The features of the rights or characteristics of rights are as under. Rights exist only in a society. So friends, rights are exist only in the society. Second, rights are claim of the individuals for their development in the society. Rights are the claims of the individuals for their development in the society. Third, rights are recognized by the society as a common claim of all the peoples. Fourth, rights are the rational and moral claims that the people makes on their society. So, as per the section 13 is concerned, so first of all, we read the section 13. Section 13, the heading of the section 13, fact relevant when right or custom is in question, where the question is as to the existence of any right or custom. I repeat it, where the question is as to the existence of any right or custom, the following facts are relevant. A, any transaction by which right or custom in question was created, claimed, modified, recognized, asserted, or denied, or which was inconsistent with its existence. So the A clause, I would repeat it, A clause, any transaction, that wording, any transaction is very significant. Thereafter, by which, that is also significant. So any transaction by which the right or custom in question was created, claimed, modified, recognized, or asserted, or denied, or which was inconsistent with its existence. B, particular instances in which the right or custom was claimed, recognized, or exercised, or in which its exercise was disputed, asserted, or departed from. So, my friends, while we read the section, two important concepts are there, that when the question in respect of right or custom is concerned, what has to be proved? So in clause A and clause B, there are two instances are provided. That first is the any transaction, and second the particular instances. So before go to the section, the portion which has remained, that what is meant by custom, because we have seen the rights. At the same time, we must know what is meant by the custom. So the custom is a particular rule which has existed from time immemorial and has obtained the force of law particular locality. So I would repeat it. Custom particular rule which has existed from the time immemorial and has obtained the force of law in a particular locality. So it is the custom which has existed from the ancient time. It must be continued, unaltered, uninterrupted, uniform, and constant. So it can be broadly classified. That is the characteristic of the custom. When we know or we say that this is a particular custom, then that must fulfill all the condition, that it must be ancient, it must be continued, it must be unaltered, uninterrupted, uniform, constant, and it must be peaceable and acquiesced. Thereafter, it must be reasonable. The custom must be reasonable. Then the custom is a certain and definite. It must not be a vague. It must be definite custom. Thereafter, it, it must not be immoral or not opposed to the morality or public policy. So there are four attributes of the custom. It must be immemorial, it must be reasonable, continue without interruption, and certain in nature. So these are the basically custom. What are the characteristics? This is the custom, then it must fulfill all these conditions. So at the same time, what are the kinds of the customs? So basically, there are three kinds of the custom. First is the private custom that is governed to the particular class or community or by particular family. Second, general custom. In the general custom, there are also subcategories. General custom in respect of local custom and the class custom. Thereafter, public custom. Third is the public custom. So in the section, so we come to the section. So in the section, when the question is as to the existence of any right or custom, the following facts are relevant. So the word a clause, a transaction is mentioned. So the what is mean the transaction? So we must know what is mean the transaction. Transaction means something has been concluded between two or more persons. So my friends, we must know the word which was used in clause A, any transaction, that must be very important. Unless and until that concept of transaction is we know, we cannot understand the whole section because the general meaning, the transaction means something has been concluded between the two or more persons. So I would like to give one example before going to deal with section 12. That example will be given in, I will explain in the Marathi. Suppose एक मराठीमध्ये मी तुम्हाला उदाहरण देतो त्याच्यामध्ये ट्रान्झॅक्शनच्या बाबतीमध्ये आणि तो कन्सेप्ट मी तुम्हाला एक्सप्लेन करतो आणि त्याच्यानंतर सेक्शनवरती येतो. अमितने प्रशांतच्या नावाने सेल डीड केलं. अमितने प्रशांतला एका प्रॉपर्टीचं सेल डीड करून दिलं आणि त्या सेल डीड मध्ये अमितने जी पूर्वेकडची जी बाजू आहे सेल आपल्याला बाउंड्रीज मेन्शन करणं जरुरी असतं. त्यामुळे जे सेल तयार केलेलं होतं त्या सेल डीड मध्ये त्या पूर्वेकडच्या बाउंड्री मध्ये उल्लेख करताना पूर्वेकडची जमीन ही कुलदीपची आहे त्याच्यामध्ये नमूद केलं. मग हे जे ट्रान्झॅक्शन झालेलं आहे अमितने प्रशाला प्रॉपर्टी हे काय ट्रान्झॅक्शन झालेले something has been concluded with four more parties. त्यामुळे अमितने ज्या वेळेला त्यांना एक या प्रॉपर्टीज सेल करून दिलं त्या सेल डीड मध्ये अमितने त्या बाउंड्रीज मेन्शन करताना पूर्वेकडच्या बाजूला कुलदीपची प्रॉपर्टी आहे असं नमूद केलं. तर याच्यामध्ये क्वेश्चन असा आहे की अमितने आणि प्रशांतने सेल डीड एक्झिक्यूट केलेलं होतं. तर अमितचं आणि कुलदीपचं अमितने केलेले जे सेल डीड होतं ते कुलदीपच्या बाबतीमध्ये रिलेव्हंट आहे का हा जर प्रश्न असेल तर त्याच्यामध्ये मला असं सांगायचं आहे की सपोज अमितने ज्या वेळेला सेल डीड करून दिलं कुलदीपच्या नावाने प्रशांतच्या नावाने त्याच्यामध्ये अमितने स्पेसिफिकली उल्लेख केलेला होता की पूर्वेकडची जमीन ही कुलदीपची आहे, परंतु ही फॅक्ट कुलदीपला माहीत नव्हती. त्यामुळे ज्या वेळेला अमितने प्रशांतला सेल डीड करून दिले त्यावेळेला कुलदीपची प्रॉपर्टी ही पूर्वेकडे आहे असं कुलदीपला माहीत नव्हतं. परंतु ज्या वेळेला अमित सबसिक्वेंटली ज्या वेळेला दावा दाखल करेल आणि त्याच्यामध्ये तो म्हणेल की पूर्वेकडची बाजू, पूर्वेकडची जी जमीन आहे ती माझी. हॅलो,
येतोय आवाज, येतोय, बोला यादव साहेब.
हॅलो,
हा बोला ना यादव साहेब, येतोय आवाज.
हॅलो,
येतोय आवाज
हॅलो,
यादव साहेब, येतोय आवाज.
हॅलो, आवाज येतोय?
हो येतोय येतोय येतोय
हॅलो,
येतोय आवाज यादव साहेब, कंटिन्यू करा ना.
वर्मा सर, आवाज येतोय का?
येतोय येतोय, मी
हो,
बोलतोय
येतोय.
येतोय असं.
हा, याच्यामध्ये ज्या वेळेला अमित पुन्हा जे पुन्हा जर दुसरा दावा दाखल केला, दुसरा दावा दाखल केला आणि त्याच्यामध्ये तो म्हणत असेल की पूर्वेकडची जमीन ही माझीच आहे, तर त्या केसमध्ये कुलदीप असं म्हणू शकतो की ज्या वेळेला अमितचं आणि प्रशांतचं सेलडीड झालं, त्याच्यामध्ये स्पेसिफिकली अमितने नमूद केलेलं आहे की पूर्वेकडची जागा ही कुलदीपची आहे. त्यामुळं सेक्शन 17 ऑफ द इंडियन एव्हिडन्स ऍक्ट इज कन्सर्न. इट इज द ऍडमिशन गिवन बाय द अमित इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी that property is belonging to the कुलदीप. त्यामुळे जे काय ऍडमिशन दिलेलं आहे, म्हणजे ते ऑलरेडी ट्रान्झॅक्शन कोणामध्ये, अमित आणि प्रशांतमध्ये, परंतु ज्या वेळेला सबसिक्वेंट सूट दाखल करतो अमित आणि त्याच्यामध्ये तो म्हणतो की ही प्रॉपर्टी, पूर्वेकडची प्रॉपर्टी ही माझी प्रॉपर्टी, त्यावेळेला कुलदीप म्हणू शकतो की अमित, तू जे सेलडीड झालेलं आहे अमित आणि कुलदीप प्रशांतमध्ये, त्याच्यामध्ये तू स्पेसिफिकली मान्य केलेलं आहे की जी पूर्वेकडची प्रॉपर्टी आहे ती कुलदीपची प्रॉपर्टी. त्यामुळे ते ऍडमिशन कुलदीप अमितच्या विरोधात वापरू शकतो. त्यामुळे ज्या वेळेला अमित आणि प्रशांतचं एखादं ट्रान्झॅक्शन असेल किंवा एखाद्या हे झालेलं असेल, त्यावेळेला इट इज द assertion which was made by the Amit in that cell deed that at the त्याच्यामध्ये त्यांनी assertion केलेलं आहे की पूर्वेकडची जी जागा आहे ती अमित कुलदीपची जागा आहे. त्यामुळे ती गोष्ट जी आहे अमितने केलेली सेल डीड मध्ये, दॅट इज द assertion asserted by the अमित इन द सेल डीड. आता या उदाहरणामध्ये आपण दुसरी कॉन्टिजेन्सी घेऊ. ज्यावेळी अमितने सेलडीड करून दिला, त्या सेलडीडमध्ये अमितने सेलडीडच्या बाउंड्रीज मध्ये पूर्वेकडची बाजू ही त्याची स्वतःची आहे असं नमूद केलं आणि त्याच्यामध्ये स्वतःची आहे असं नमूद केलं आणि ते सेलडीड करून दिलं. मग त्याच्यामध्ये ज्या वेळेला तो दावा दाखल करेल त्याच्या विरुद्ध दावा दाखल करेल, त्यावेळेला तो काय म्हणायचं, त्यांनी असं नाही म्हणायचं की जे सेलडीड एक्झिक्यूट केलेलं अमित आणि प्रशांतमध्ये, त्याच्यामध्ये ते स्पेसिफिकली नमूद केलेलं की पूर्वेकडची जी जमीन आहे ती माझी आहे. आणि इट इज अ सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी स्टेटमेंट. स्वतःच्या स्वतः विरुद्ध तुम्ही नाही वापरू शकत. सो दॅट मस्ट बी रिमेंबर्ड. त्यामुळे हे ट्रान्झॅक्शनच्या बाबतीतले मी तुम्हाला त्याच्यासाठी उदाहरण दिलं. Transaction means something that has been concluded between the two or more persons. Doing a transaction is something already done and completed. So for the section 13 is concerned, transaction must be already completed, not continuing. It must be completed in the past. A transaction is something already done or completed. So whatever may be done by one person which affects the another right and out of which a cause of action may arise is called as a transaction. And the transaction must be the transaction is genuine transaction and bona fide transaction. For this section 13, the wording any transaction is concerned, that transaction must be genuine and bona fide. If it is not bona fide, then it cannot be claimed or that cannot be called as a transaction. So at the same time, we have to consider any transaction by which, the word by which, is very important because by which the right or custom is created, a transaction by which a right is created, claim or modify is admissible. It is important to note that the wording of the section is that any transaction by which right is claimed, we have to read in such a way, any transaction by which right is created, any transaction by which right is claimed, any transaction by which right is modified, or any transaction by which right is asserted. So in this example, we have seen that Prashant has asserted the right, Amit has asserted the right of the Kuldeep. So, my friends, it must be also to know what is meant by claimed. So the wording which was used in the section created, then claimed. Claim denotes a demand or assertion in relation to the thing as against or from some person, showing the existence of right to in its claimant. So the if party is claiming that right, then what has to be proved? That claim denotes or assertion, claim denotes a demand. Demand, that is in the wording itself. Claim is demand or assertion in relation to the thing as against or from some person. That it must be demanded from some person, showing the existence of right to it in a claimant. So when we are claiming the right, it must be demanded. So that must be in the above example which I have given, in which Amit has not claimed any, Kuldeep has not claimed any right in the transaction, but the Amit has asserted the right of the Kuldeep. So what is meant by asserted? Asserted means insisted upon anything to affirm and so on. Amit has affirmed or confirmed the right of the Kuldeep. So it must remember that assertion is to be done by the party and has to be affirm the right of other. In respect of claim is concerned, claim must be, that is claimed, right? Claimed means it must be demanded by the party. Unless and until that right is demanded, it cannot be termed as a claimed. So thereafter, the word recognized is concerned means to know again. To recognize is to take the cognizance of that which come again before our notice. That is again come to the notice. That must be recognized. So the wording in the clause A, read again. Any transaction by which the right or custom in question was created, claimed, modified, recognized, or asserted or denied, or which was inconsistent with its existence. B clause, particular instances in which the right or custom was claimed. I repeat it, particular instances. The word used was not instance, but the instances, that is the past participle. The particular instances in which the right or custom was claimed, recognized, or exercised, or in which its exercise was disputed, asserted, or departed from. So, my friends, what is meant by the word is used in a particular instances. So, instances means in a general, in a legal parlance or in the legal term, instances means an example, something which has occurred. That is the instance. We says that that instance was occurred. ती घटना घडलेली होती. Something which has once occurred. It must instances must it must be the instances prior to the suit in question, because this clause is the past tense throughout. So that instances must be past before lodging of the suit, that instances must have had happened. So that must be remembered, that instances must be prior to the suit in question. So if you kindly consider the example of sale deed is concerned, in the sale deed, transfer by the way of sale deed, sale of the property, what is necessarily implies? It necessarily involves an assertion that the transferor owes the interest transferred, and therefore a transaction by which such a right is claimed or asserted. Sale deed therefore admissible under this section. I repeat it again, that the transfer by the way of sale of the property, what it implies, that the person who is transferring that property has a right to transfer, and that he is having the ownership of that property, and due to which he is transferring that right. So the right is, by which such a right is claimed or asserted, and such a deal therefore is admissible under this section. So section 13 is concerned, if sale deed is admissible under this, because it is the transaction by which it is claimed or right is asserted. So there is a one judgment in respect of that sale deed is concerned, that is the document inter parties. Hari Prasad versus Dev Narayan, AIR 1956, Supreme Court 305. Hari Prasad versus Dev Narayan, AIR 1956, Supreme Court 305. So my friends, I would like to invite the attention of the illustration which was provided by the author, because it is very important. So the illustration in the section 13, I am reading the illustration. The question is whether A has a right to fishery, a deed confirming the fishery on A's ancestor. I am repeating that word, a deed confirming the fishery on A's ancestor, a mortgage of fishery by A's father, a subsequent grant of fishery by A's father, irreconcilable with the mortgage, particular instances in which A's father exercised the right, or in which the exercise of right was stopped by A's neighbor, are relevant fact. So here in this illustration, if you can see, the deed confirming the right on A's ancestor. Second line, a deed confirming the right on A's ancestor in a transaction by which right is created in favor of A's ancestor, and A is inheriting from them would be entitled to that right. So the A's and there is a deed, that deed confirms that right to the A's ancestor, and by that deed, that is the transaction, that is A's ancestor in a transaction by which right is created in A's ancestor. By the deed, that right is created in A's ancestor. So thereafter, after the death of A, that property will evolve on the heirs of the A. So that will automatically get to the A's heirs. If A's father had a mortgage in that illustration, if A's father has mortgaged the right to someone, the mortgagee would be entitled to the right and not A. I repeating that word, that wording. Suppose if A's father had mortgaged the right to someone else, the mortgagee would be entitled to the right and not A. So here in the illustration, A's deed confirming the right of fishery to A's ancestor. Thereafter, A dies, then property will evolve on A's heirs. But before dying of A's ancestor, he made a mortgage to the someone else. Then the mortgage is entitled to that right and not A, because the mortgage is the transaction by which right is created in favor of the mortgage. So it is a subsequent transaction. That is the mortgage. First is the deed that confirming the right on A's ancestor. If A is alive in the during lifetime, A has had mortgage that property to someone else, then the mortgage entitled to that right and not by the A, because mortgage is the transaction by which right is created in the mortgage. If after mortgage A's father grant right to anyone, the grantee claims the right. See the condition in which after the mortgage is done, father again grants the right to anyone. The grantee claims the right. A grantee will not be entitled to the right because the earlier transaction of the mortgage is inconsistent with the subsequent grant. Because first of all, he has made the mortgage to someone else. Thereafter, he grants the right to anyone else. So there is an inconsistency between the earlier mortgage made by the father and thereafter grant of right to anyone. So there is an inconsistent with the subsequent grant. The prior mortgage and the subsequent grant which was made by A's father, which is inconsistent with the mortgage which was made by the A's father. So if the question is whether grantee is entitled to the right, the earlier mortgage would be a relevant fact to show that he is not. In that case, when the question is arose that the grantee is entitled the right in that property, in that case, the earlier mortgage which was made by the A's father, that would be a relevant fact to show that the grantee will not be entitled that right. Suppose another example is concerned, the deed between the A and B, whether it would be relevant between A and C. A and B ने जर एखादा डीड केला असेल तर ते ए आणि सी मध्ये रिलेव्हंट आहे का? त्याचप्रमाणे ए आणि बी मध्ये स्पेसिफिक प्लेडिंग केले असतील, डावामध्ये स्पेसिफिक प्लेडिंग केले असतील तर ते प्लेडिंग ए आणि सी मध्ये रिलेव्हंट आहेत का? त्याच्यामध्ये एक्झाम्पल, transaction in which A has asserted his rights. So the example which I have explained in respect of Amit, Prashant and Kuldeep is concerned, a transaction in which A has asserted his right. So the question must become that why it should not be the transaction in which right is claimed, because in which Kuldeep is not claiming any rights, in which a right can, when it can be said as a claimed, a right can be said to be claimed against another only if the claim is made to his knowledge. असं कधी म्हणता येईल की हा राईट क्लेम केलेला आहे, तर ज्या वेळेला तो क्लेम केलेला आहे, ज्याच्या विरुद्ध क्लेम केलेला आहे त्याला त्याचं नॉलेज मिळालं तरच तो क्लेम केलेला आहे असं म्हटलं जातं. सो राईट कॅन बी सेड टू बी क्लेम्ड अगेन्स्ट द अनदर only if the claim is made to his knowledge. Similarly, a person's right can be said to be denied. असं कधी म्हणता येईल की person's right to be said to be denied only if it is denied to that person's knowledge. So in the example which I have given, that Kuldeep is ignorant about the content of the document. Kuldeep is ignorant about the sale deed which was executed between Amit and Prashant. So the wording which was in the 30, claim or denied, not to be applied. That is the fallacy. which has to be seen. कारण की त्याच्यामध्ये जे एक्झाम्पल मी तुम्हाला दिलं अमित प्रशांत कुलदीपचं, त्याच्यामध्ये अमितने प्रशांतला ते सेल्डेड करून दिलेलं आहे. त्याच्यामध्ये कुलदीपनं अमितने पूर्वेकडे बाउंड्रीज ज्या आहेत त्याच्यामध्ये नमूद केलेलं आहे की पूर्वेकडची जागा आहे कुलदीपची आहे. तर त्या कॉन्टिजन्सीमध्ये कुलदीपला काय माहित होतं की बाबा तो राईट जो आहे तो असर्ट केलेला आहे. So I am using that word asserted. So Kuldeep is not demanding or not claiming his that right. So that is the that has to be seen that when the Kuldeep is ignorant about the content of cellular between the Amit and Prashant, in that case, the wording which was used in the clause A, that is claimed or denied, not applied. At the same time, the wording which was used in clause A, created and recognized, are clearly inapplicable. So that has to be seen. Thereafter, so when the case is not fell under clause A, whether it will be fell under the clause B of the section 13, that is the particular instances in which right or custom was claimed, recognized, or exercised, in which its exercise was disputed, asserted, or departed from. So here in this the case which I have given the example, the C is not claiming that thing. That is the Kuldeep is not claiming that I have a right in that property unless and until it is claimed, as I have explained earlier. A right can be said to be claimed against the another only if the claim is made to his knowledge. So that has to be considered. So considering the section 13 is concerned, there are some relevant provision in the Evidence Act also. That is section 32, subclause 4 is concerned. That in respect of section, if you kindly consider section 32, subclause 4 of the Indian Evidence Act. So section 32, the heading of the section, cases in which the statement of the relevant fact by a person who is dead or cannot be found is relevant. So the subclause 4 is concerned, gives the opinion as to the public right or custom or the matter of general interest. So I am just only enlightening that as far as the section 13 is concerned, in respect of right or custom is concerned, the similar provision is also mentioned in section 32, subclause 4, which specifically deals with gives opinion as to the public right or custom or matter of general interest. Thereafter, relevant provision in section subclause 7, a document relating to the transaction mentioned in section 13, clause A. So that is also one of the important provision which is connected with the section 13. I am repeating that clause 7 of section 32, document relating to the transaction mentioned in section 13, clause A. I am reading that section wording. When the statement is contained in a deed, will, or other document which relates to the transaction as is mentioned in section 13, clause A. So, as per my knowledge, I have explained the section 12 and 13. I would give lot of thanks to our seniors and our APP cadre who has given me opportunity to explain my views in respect of section 12 and 13. Thank you.
48. 48, section 48.
यादव साहेब 48 सेक्शन वर बोलावं असं म्हणतायत सर. आपण बोलावं 48 सेक्शन.
हॅलो
हा यादव साहेब,
हॅलो
सेक्शन 48 एव्हिडन्स ऍक्ट.
हॅलो
हा येतोय आवाज माझा यादव साहेब? यादव साहेब, आमचा आवाज येतोय का? हॅलो यादव साहेब,
So one of the important section I have to remember is section 48 of the Indian Evidence Act. In that also, if you kindly see the section 48, opinion as to the existence of right or custom when relevant. The wording of section 48, opinion as to the existence of right or custom when relevant. When the court has to form an opinion as to the existence of any general custom or right, the opinions as to the existence of such a right, so existence of such a custom or right of a person who would be likely to know of its existence if it existed are relevant. So the person who having the knowledge about the existence of that custom, he would be in a position to give the opinion in respect of that custom or right. So the explanation is also important. The expression general custom or right includes the custom or rights common to any considerable class of persons. The explanation, I am repeating it, the expression general custom or right includes custom or rights common to any considerable class of persons. Illustration, the right of the villagers of a particular village to use the water of particular well is a general right within of this section. So this is the one of the important provision which has to be considered along with section section 13 of the Indian Evidence Act is concerned. Also, section 92 subclause 5 92 proviso 5 of the Indian Evidence Act, in which also if you kindly see in section 92 proviso 5, that is also relevant while considering the section that has to be considered while dealing with section 13. So the section 92, the wording of the section 92 is that exclusion of the evidence of an oral agreement. So the proviso 5, any usage or custom by which incident not expressly mentioned in any contracts are usually annexed to the contract of that description may be proved. I'm repeating that any usage or custom by which inconsistent sorry, any custom or any usage or custom by which incident not expressly mentioned in any contract are usually annexed to the contract of that description may be proved, provided that annexing of such an incident would not